Stellar Life, mission log number 225.
So we actually might feel pretty confident about something that we did, but we'll downplay it. We don't want to brag. We don't want to boast. We don't want to seem cocky. So we start to downplay it. So we don't want people to find out that we've got this, that we're as amazing as we are, because it doesn't feel safe, right? So we diminish, but then what starts to happen, because we don't want anybody to find out that we're different or we're not part of the group, so we try to blend in. But what happens is then we start to believe the diminished version of ourselves. That belief is the reason you're not charging what you want to charge, or you're not asking for what you want to ask for, or you're not really stepping fully into the relationship or the role that you want to step into.
Welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Get inspired and live out loud. From love, freedom, and success to having it all. Here's your host, coach, speaker, and shining star, Orion.
Roger, you're looking good.
Hi, welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. Today we're going to speak about imposter complex. Imposter complex or imposter syndrome is the idea that you can be successful and you can do things, but you always feel like an imposter, like you're never good enough. And if somebody will find out and actually see beyond, they will see that you are not this amazing person that you are trying to show that you are. That happens a lot with, let's say, somebody grew up in a very poor upbringing and then they get wealthy, but they still inside feel like that little poor boy that is looking up to others. And somewhere deep inside, they don't feel like they're good enough. And so whatever they do in life, they feel like, I'm an imposter. It doesn't matter how much success I have. It doesn't matter that I've proven to myself that I was able to help so many people. It doesn't matter that I made all this money. It doesn't matter that I was able to get where I am today. I still feel like an imposter. That happens to the best of us. And so my guest is going to help you eliminate this imposter complex, and she is extraordinary, and she is here to remind you that you are exactly who you think you are on a good day. Tanya Geisler is a certified leadership coach, TEDxWomen speaker, and writer who teaches high-performing leaders how to combat their imposter complex and lead with impeccable impact so they can achieve their ultimate goals. Her clients include best-selling authors, public speakers, and rockstar motivators. And now, without further ado, on to the show!
2, 1, 0.
Hi, Tanya, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. It is so much fun having you here. Thank you for being here.
Oh my God, I'm so delighted. It's already been a blast.
Yeah, I know. I really like what you're about, and I really love the topic of this episode. And I really think that everybody that is listening is going to be incredibly happy with what you have to share because you know how to lift people up. But before we start, can you share a little bit about yourself from your perspective, more than a bio, something about how did you connect to this passion and how did it appear in your life?
Oh my God. Just go right there, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'm a leadership coach and I think it's something I've been doing, you've heard this a million times from a million different people, but I think I've been doing this my whole life. And I've always tried to make the through line between where people are most alive and then where they're most helpful. And I think I've just always been doing that. I connected with somebody on Facebook and they were a friend back in grade 3. And she said, the least surprising thing in the world to me is that you're a leadership coach and that you're a speaker because you're always on stage. You're always supporting people. But my career, I started out in advertising and it was kind of a soul-sucking experience. And there was a very short season where my daughter was born and my mom passed away at pretty much the same time. And I just thought, oof.
Oh my God.
Right?
Wow.
And life is big and it's short. And I got to find meaning and I've got to make meaning. And so that sent me along this path. And I found coaching, started coaching complete amazing leaders, rock stars, motivators. And I kept seeing this through line. Didn't matter who they were presenting with what I now understand to be the imposter complex. And I keep seeing it as the bottleneck of people's success and their fullest activation. And I have no time for it. Like I gotta help people with it. So that's why I do what I do. And I've seen all the places in my own life where it had to help me back. I want us all to be free of that. So that's why I do what I do. Mother of an incredible 16-year-old kid who's just remarkable. My husband is right now, he works for the Red Cross, and I literally hear him on the phone right now getting PPEs for folks who are working on the COVID-19,
Wow.
Yeah, like that's literally, he's on the phone negotiating millions of PPEs right now. So life is big and beautiful and complex. That's who I am.
Wow. 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 So I've heard a lot about imposter syndrome or complex. What do you think it is?
I always like to start with a little bit of a history lesson because I like to attribute the teachers. Imposter phenomenon is the term that clinical psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes came up with about this experience back in 1978. So they were working with high-functioning, high-achieving women, and they noticed the same through line that I had noticed in my high-functioning clients, and that was that these women that they were working with seemed to be incapable of internalizing their success. Okay, so any success that they had, they would chalk up to luck, fluke, timing, or having somehow managed to deceive people into thinking they were smarter or more capable than they actually were. And they were more than able to identify with their failures, right? So any failure, like that was completely on them, but any success, well, that was some external factor. So that's what the imposter phenomenon is. You mentioned it as the imposter syndrome. So that's what most of us know it. We recognize it as imposter syndrome. My SEO people get really pissed off that I don't use imposter syndrome because that would make it a lot easier to find my work. But technically, it's not a syndrome because it's not a clinical diagnosis. It's an experience. It's a phenomenon. It's complex, but it's not a syndrome. And so I don't use that. I don't call it a syndrome for that very reason. But it is a complex. And part of the reason is, I feel like we can co-opt a lot of medical terms, and I really want to leave syndrome for folks who are, legitimately struggling with a clinical diagnosis of some sort. So that's just helpful, I think, to understand. But the truth is, people experience the imposter complex who are high functioning with strong values of mastery, integrity, and excellence. So I always think there's a bit of good news that presents with it. Like it's not just about feeling terrible. It's not just about feeling like a fraud. But it really afflicts people with those strong values. So I always think that's a bit of good news. But the bad news is that it tries to keep us out of action, doubting our capacity, and alone and isolated. And it does this in very fascinating and complex ways that I'm sure we'll be getting into. So that's what it is overarchingly.
Yeah, I like what you said about if you're not clinically diagnosed, don't say I have the imposter syndrome, because we tend, especially people with imposter complex, tend to label themselves with all type of labels. So I think the complex will make you label yourself as having the syndrome.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, that's great.
What is the core reason why people have that?
We understand it to be bioevolutionary in context, that it's, an instrument of evolution to make sure we don't evolve or mutate too quickly. It's also part of our very tribal need to belong. It's really obsessed with that. So we're always trying to fit in. And that doesn't make us wrong. That just makes us tribal in nature, right? It's like that's part of our survival. So this is the reason the imposter complex will speak in competence extremities, right? You're either a complete success or a raging failure. And that's why it actually has us afraid of massive failure or massive success. I've had 2 different conversations today with prospective clients, and in both cases, they would say they're afraid of failing, but really they're afraid of succeeding, because then we're very much othered from the rest of the group, right? And so we don't want to be othered. We want to belong. We want to be in the safety of the group.
Because the bigger you get, the more polarizing you get.
That's right.
And I think there is a deep fear of rejection. If you look at Oprah Winfrey or Tony Robbins, they are very polarizing. Some people, they love them so much, and some people will say anything against them.
Yeah.
So the bigger you get, the more polarizing you get, the more criticism, rejection, and trolls you get on the media.
Yeah. And also projection, right? It's also all the projection that we get. There's also the disconnection that we get too. Even if we are still well regarded, we still feel a massive amount of disconnection. And for me, I see this all the time with leaders and entrepreneurs. They have a fear that if I get too big, that means that I will have to disconnect from the people who got me this far. And we've also, we've done it. We've all participated in sort of tear down culture. We've all felt disconnected when somebody that we really admire and kind of, I call it hero worship. I've done some comparison work with a colleague, Lauren Bacon, and we talk about comparison and this hero worship aspect. But we've had this experience where we'll put somebody on a pedestal only to knock them off. So that's a huge part of why we don't want that wild success, because we imagine that it's going to happen to us because we have done it. We've colluded, we've conspired in that way. So, that's a huge part of the reason people fear success is we've witnessed it and we've contributed to that experience.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference between men and women having this complex?
So I'm really glad you asked that in that way, because I know that when I started to talk about it, I was talking about how Clance and I worked with women. And that's really specific because that's where the research started, or really the documentation of the research started. It was with women. But we do know that men experience it as well. The difference is how we have been socialized. So everybody can experience it, but how we've been socialized is going to impact the level and severity. And then I'll also say that it's gendered in the research, but there are many, 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 many different intersections that we need to be paying attention to when we think about this, about the imposter complex. It's not a one size fits all. We don't all experience it in the same ways. So I describe it like this, and not everybody loves it, but this is just how I see it. And I figure I'm the one people are asking. So, okay, here we go. If we consider what the center of the universe is, like with his permission, I call it Greg. Greg is my husband. A white, able-bodied, cisgender, neurotypical dude living in North America with middle-class means, right? So he's sort of like what the world is intended to revolve around, or at least here in North America. Right. So for every concentric circle that you are othered from this center, you're going to feel it. So we'll experience it usually by gender, by race, by class, by age, by ability, by neurotypicality, et cetera, et cetera. So for every concentric circle you feel distanced from his lived experience, you're going to feel it that much more amplified. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Or you're going to resent it.
Yeah, right. Totally. Mm-hmm. But that's not to suggest that somebody sitting at the center doesn't experience it as well. They experience it, but it's more exacerbated the more places of distinction you have from that dominant culture.
I think also men are more allowed to brag, where women don't brag among themselves as much as men do. And it's super, super cool in the business circles for men to really speak about their achievement and even exaggerate their achievements, because then they're cool. But women usually do the opposite.
Correct. That's what I would call feminine conditioning. And that's my friend and colleague, Joe Casey, talks about feminine conditioning. So all of the places that if you identify as a woman, you've been conditioned to nice girls do this and good girls don't do that. And, so all of these messages that we get are, a lot of them run side saddle with some of these behavioral traits that the imposter complex kind of has us hide out in. I can say a little bit more about that. But so again, to your point, if the imposter complex wants to keep us out of action, doubting our capacity, and alone and isolated, the two things that you've just mentioned that are somewhat gendered in terms of how men are congratulated is around action, and then also being very proud of their accomplishments, whereas we're told to just like stay low, stay quiet, and stay sort of more silent. That's, using a really wide brushstroke, but
yes, we are.
that's what we see. Yeah.
Yes, we are. Of course, there are different individuals and different, not everybody is the same. But yeah, in general, this is what we see in the world.
Yeah.
Do you think also imposter syndrome can stem from childhood trauma or having a certain childhood and growing up and like for me, I think I have some of this complex because I do have a fear of success. I think I don't want the success to take the time from my family. I think this is something big for me right now. And also I grew up very poor and now I live a very comfortable life. And there is always like, if they knew who I really am or where I really came from, or I think there is this in the back of my mind, plus some probably childhood traumas that I experienced. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yes. There's, in what you just shared, if we were going into it, there's how you relate probably to your family of origin and what it feels like to succeed beyond what they thought was possible, maybe for themselves, and then what's possible for you. So that already creates a dissonance for you in your origin story of belonging, right? So you've already broken the mold.
Definitely. Yeah.
Right. So that's like, oh, if I'm not this poorer person, then who am I? And I don't know. So it means I don't necessarily fit in that world anymore. And what's this new world? And can I fit in there? Because again, it's really quite obsessed with how we're belonging or not belonging. And then of course that also creates this tension of who am I to ... Like, I don't know anything about this new world. So there's that belonging piece. I think that there's a piece of the sin about shining. It probably hasn't felt safe. Maybe when you were growing up to be bright and beautiful and all of the things that you are. So maybe there's some diminishment that has happened as a result of that.
Yes. I was very, very out loud, very creative. So I think people don't love that. Especially, when I came here to the US and I studied acting, I studied at the neighborhood playhouse. And I've never experienced bullying before. I didn't even ever had a name for that. I had a heavier accent and I was very different. And I just came to study acting after living in Tokyo for 3.5 years. So what I was wearing was a little bit different. I was different and I didn't fit the mold and the kids put me down. I never ever experienced it. Like I never knew that it was bullying, but now thinking about it, yes, it was. Like I was not the popular kid and I was very naive. I didn't know that people were talking behind my back and that made me very sad and it made me want to belong and diminish who I was. It made me change what I used to wear. It made me really try to eliminate my accent. And I don't know, maybe there is a part there that is a part of it.
Yes. And so my deepest desire, and what I see you doing right now, even with the language that you're using, the stellar life, right? We're talking stars, baby. We're talking stars. This is, you've discovered somewhere along the line and the wounds run deep, but that your places of distinction are actually what's really magnetizing about you. That's really what's radiant and glorious and to be celebrated. But oh boy, we don't know that when we're younger and, wearing different clothes and believing people when life tells us who we're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Very, very, very painful. So I thank you so much for sharing with me and for all of us that I think that there are lots of people who will understand what it feels like to have broken the mold and that it doesn't feel safe to break the mold. And so this continues, if we don't attend to that, then we continue to live our life inside of these molds because we see what happens when you break the mold. So you naming that is really helpful to everyone. And I want to just also acknowledge too, your question was about, does trauma play a part in this? Absolutely. I like to be very mindful about when I attempt, let me just say that differently. I attempt to be very clear when we're talking about the imposter complex and then when we're talking about other factors that might be in play. So I have a podcast called Ready Enough, and that's where I talk about these different places of intersection where it's like it looks like imposter complex and it smells like imposter complex, but you know what? It's actually, there's also some trauma that's going on here, or there's some anxiety, or maybe there's some transphobia or some racism or like something else that's also happening. And so I just like to be really mindful and bring in that nuance that for the most part, when we are dealing with the imposter complex, it looks like this, and there are always going to be other factors that are at play. I've got a dear friend, Stacey Jordan Shelton, that always reminds me and all of us that we might be having a shared space, but not necessarily a shared experience. So your imposter complex is going to manifest differently from mine because of your lived experience, because of, you know, how people relate to you, because of what you're wearing or your accent. And when we strip down into the fact that there's diminishment happening, then we know what we're dealing with. And that's why I think knowing the behavioral traits, the places that we hide out to avoid feeling like an imposter, are really helpful. So for you, we've sort of like touched on, I think there might be some diminishment in some places. The other places that we like to hang out or hide out are comparison and perfectionism, procrastination, leaky boundaries, and people pleasing. So there are 6 in all. And we all have our kind of natural set points. Mine tends to be around people pleasing. And so that's where I want to make sure that, you know, that everybody likes me and that I belong in that way. But all of these behavioral traits can be these double binds, meaning we go to the behavior to avoid feeling like the imposter. But when we hang out there, we start to believe that we're the imposter.
Can you repeat those behavioral traits?
Yeah. So diminishment, comparison, perfectionism, procrastination, leaky boundaries, and people pleasing.
What is diminishment?
So that's that experience where you've named or where it didn't feel safe to shine. So you kind of hide your light. So we actually might feel pretty confident about something that we did, but we'll downplay it. We don't want to brag. We don't want to boast. We don't want to seem cocky. So we start to downplay it. So we don't want people to find out that we've got this, you know, that we're as amazing as we are, because it doesn't feel safe, right? So we diminish. But then what starts to happen, because we don't want anybody to find out that we're different or not part of the group, so we like try to blend in. But what happens is then we start to believe the diminished version of ourselves.
Yeah, I can totally relate, because it took me years to tap into color again, tap into my inner colors and be like, this is what makes me who I am. And this is what is needed in the world. And they don't need a fake version or a copycat version of who I am. The world needs who I am. I am truly. I think we are, throughout life, we keep learning about ourselves and our capabilities and who we are. And there are tools and ways to excel it. By healing, by working with a coach, by learning from people that went through the same thing. So we don't need to waste the next 20 years trying to figure it out alone, because there are people like you who already figured it out. So how do you help people heal? Because it seems like to me that there is some healing that needs to happen in order for people to remove this mask.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the first thing I say is in the self-development space, we want to make ourselves wrong for hiding out in these behaviors. So we want to make ourselves wrong for being a perfectionist or a people pleaser or diminishing. And I think the first thing to recognize is that those aren't inherently bad things. I mean, you've diminished because of your value of safety and also probably your value of humility. That's a beautiful thing. So I like to always give a little bit of extra room because, again, you know, in the self-development space, it's like, stop being a perfectionist. It's like, well, if it was that easy. But really, one is a perfectionist because of their value of excellence. Leaky boundaries might have everything to do with being really generous. I'm a people pleaser because I value inclusivity. And, you know, comparison is about connection, and procrastination is not always about being lazy. It's about discernment. So I think that the first place is to go, okay, there's this aspect of myself that can get in my way. And it's only a problem when it keeps me out of action, doubting my capacity, and alone and isolated. That's when it's a problem. And that's when that is the bottleneck. And that's what I would call the imposter complex is now a bottleneck to that person's success. So really we need to get super clear about what expansion and activation and living a life fulfilled and what impeccable impact means to that person, what's available to them beyond that bottleneck. And then understanding which one of those behaviors or traits are uniquely theirs. So then we can kind of go in. Like, if your thing is diminishment, then that tells me that we need to root into presence for you. We need for you to start to trust more and more deeply into your power. Make sure that you're surrounding yourself by excellent support and holding a sense of reverence for yourself and the brilliant, multicolored, multifaceted human that you are, instead of trying to make us wrong for it. So for each person, there's kind of a different entryway. But when everything is said and done, we need to really look at what's in the way. We need to really look at making sure that we are gathering all of the right support and that we're taking aligned and right action rather than hustling in the wrong direction. Because that's something that we'd love to do. We love to like just take any action and just like barrel through. But if it's not aligned, then it's not right action. So it's not a small process by any stretch of the imagination. I teach a process over a 12-week period because it does take that long. But when people have these tools, they can come back to them time and time again because, as you say, we're always learning and we're always evolving. And so, for each next stage that we get on, there's going to be a bigger one that we want because that's how the ego works. It wants to want more than it wants to get. So there's always the next thing. There's always the next place where we're going to feel in the question of, am I capable enough to do that? Who am I to do X, Y, and Z? Sure, I've been on the Today Show. Sure, I sat on Oprah's couch when I was actually allowed to be, with people. But now here's this other thing. There's this much bigger thing. And am I ready for that? So it's about building up the tool set to be able to use it time and time again, every time we're at the precipice of our expansion.
One tool that I think is really helpful that some people can do is to just sit by yourself and write down all your achievements. Write down all the things that you never imagined that you'll be able to do and you did. It can be big or small, and you're going to end up with such a big list. And then you go over this list, you're going to feel pretty good about yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you named that. In my work, I call that bolstering your authority thesis. And usually one of the things that people have an easier time doing is creating brag books, or what I call a Yaminier folder. So this is like, the place where you put all of those lovely things that people have said, all of those lovely testimonials and tweets and everything else. And we put that in a folder, and it's wonderful, but we have to do what you said first, which is to do our own internal audit, our own internal inventory of our strengths, of the things that we have survived and delivered and healed and created and won, because we have to know that for ourselves first, because then we have a fighting chance of believing people and their words about how great we are. Because especially for people pleasers, we're just going to tend to chalk up everything people say to them just being nice, right? Not really allowing space for that to be their truth. So you're absolutely right. It's an internal job first, and then it's an external job, but it is critical. And then when you have those reference points of how fantastic you truly are, every time you're at this place of expansion, of next, of I'm about to break this mold, can I do this? You can remind yourself all the times that you have, when you've stood at this precipice and you've jumped and you remembered that the party was on the other side of that resistance because you've done it many times before, even if it didn't look exactly like this current situation.
Yeah. When I work with my clients, I like to have them connect to a different version of themselves. I talk a lot about the inner goddess for the ladies, and also for the ladies, I work with women mostly, unleashing your inner superhero. So these are two very different ways to approach it, but they're also, when integrated, they're super powerful. Because for women, awakening the inner goddess is feeling like a beautiful, sensual, attractive, goddess-like person. And if you are like a goddess, which is respecting the God that is inside of you, then the world will treat you like that. if you are connected and if this is what you're radiant, this is what you emanate, that inner joy, inner juiciness, that like you emanate your light, and this attracts people to you like butterflies to a flame. And the superhero, and I love that lately in the world there are so many superhero movies and leading women in leading roles. And I love Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot, not because we're from the same origin. We both served in the IDF, and we both are from Israel. And she's amazing. She's super genuine. She's super beautiful from the inside out. And I just love the way she portrays Wonder Woman, and in this like very, very real, genuine way. So women do need to step into it depends on where you are in life, whether you need to step into the goddess part or you need to have more of the superhero part, and you want to claim your strength. And life is not linear. We go through ups and downs, and sometimes we need more of this or more of the other. But the moment you claim those traits, you claim what you need, it will help you rise. And I think it will help you believe in yourself a little more.
Yes. Oh, gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
For somebody who's listening right now and they're like, oh my God, I love what Tanya is talking about. And yes, I have this complex. What is besides working with you, what is something that they can do right now to connect more into their inner strength?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm just really struck by what you just said. And I think conjure what Orion was just speaking into. And then notice what comes up as you're trying to access your superhero, your super goddess, or, when you try to access, what are the beliefs that go ahead and start to chase that away? And then I think if this is not a natural set point for you, that you're feeling really challenged by it, start to pay attention to what those voices are. Who am I to X, Y, and Z? I can't do this right. Like whatever those follow-up beliefs are that make it challenging for you to really fully step in and claim that superhero, then you have a name for what's happening. I mean, you might be having it right now, like listening to Orion speak or me speak, and you think, I'd love to be on Orion's podcast, and I'll never be able to do that. I'll never be able to conjure that, not the way she can. You've got comparison going on. Or whatever it is, I think it's really important for you to understand for yourself what that behavioral trait is that's going to get in your way. If you don't know what that is, you can go to my site. There's a quiz, TanyaGeisler.com/quiz, that'll help you unpack which one of those behavioral traits are up for you. But that's if you try to step into that role that Orion is talking about. If you find that challenging and you've got some follow-up beliefs about that, go pursue that. Because that belief is the reason you're not charging what you want to charge, or you're not asking for what you want to ask for, or you're not really stepping fully into the relationship or the role that you want to step into. And so I think that's really helpful intel, because what's showing up in this area of your life is probably showing up in all the areas of your life. So let's get curious about what is in the way. And then also, I want people to remember too, that we are all here to model possibility for each other. So think about for yourself, listeners, like what is it that you want to model possibility for others? Like what is it that you want to have others look up to you? And again, whatever those buts are showing up will help you to unpack what has been in the way of all of your activation. So that's where I would have people look.
Yeah. And tapping into this new version, like you said, you have the 12-week program?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't happen in a day. And there are ways and exercises and things to do to tap into that. Sometimes it doesn't even seem related. A lot of time it has something to do with breath work, physical movement. Your mind and body are very connected. There are so many ways to tap into that. Don't think that, oh my God, now I'm going to, in 1 minute, eliminate my complex and step into that starring role that I want to step into. And no, you taught yourself something for many, many years. You told your reptilian brain, that part of your brain that is very ancient, and you told it, this is my identity. I am not enough. I cannot achieve enough. And so in order to change the belief, you'll have to invest some time in order to install a new belief. The change in your consciousness can happen like this. And still, you will need to do the work every day. And it might take a couple of months. It might take a year. And it will probably take a lifetime, because we are infinite possibilities, and we are constantly growing and shifting and creating and co-creating. So every time you evolve to a certain level, you tap into a new one. So this is a never-ending work. So there is no rush and there is no pressure. As long as you evolved a little bit every day, you're going to get to new heights and new places that you never imagined are possible before.
Yes.
I love your yes.
Oh my God. So good. It's so good.
I want a recording of that. Actually, I do have a recording of that.
Yes. That's your new ringtone. The question I always ask, am I making progress, is really pretty much like the question to be asking on an ongoing basis. Because again, the imposter complex is obsessed with certainty, perfectionism. It's absolutely like, it has to be perfect. Otherwise, forget it. But the kinder way to be is just exactly what you've articulated. It's bit by bit. Am I making progress? Because this is incremental. This is absolutely incremental.
Right.
Brilliant.
So let's talk about your leadership coach. And now with leadership and speaking on stages, life is completely changed. I don't know when we're all going to be able to go to the next conference before having my baby. I used to travel 2 or 3 times a month to different destinations, going to many seminars and traveling within the state or around the world. And I told my husband yesterday, I was like, wow, we're so lucky we got to have all this travel before COVID hit. And it was like, yeah, can you imagine? Because but there was so much uncertainty, talking about imposter complex and how it affects everything. Like right now, we can't even travel. We can't even do the things that we want to do. Plus, there is so much stress. There is so much anxiety. People are, you were talking about people shining. And now just think about the mental impact of everybody's wearing a mask. And nobody is allowed to shine. Yeah, you can have a cool mask on, but people don't even look at each other in the eyes, because there is so much. Yes, COVID is real and it's dangerous and it's horrible. We don't need all the fear. We don't need to live in so much fear. We don't need to be glued to the news. There is way too much fear, and the world is about social distancing. We don't need to be antisocial. We need to be maybe physically distancing from each other. But speak to your neighbor, speak to the person in the supermarket, do it from a safe distance, smile even when you're wearing a mask. Because if you wanna shine, if you wanna step into leadership, it starts in the supermarket, wearing a mask. Not only behind your computer and going live on Facebook. So please, some advice for leadership in this COVID world.
Yeah.
And with all the fear and anxiety.
All right. Okay, so imposter complex breeds in uncertainty, right? That's what I just said. Like, it loves uncertainty. It thrives in it. So there are lots of ways in which this is like the most prime time for people to have imposter complex, right? So it's the moment COVID-19 struck, people, leaders, entrepreneurs, what can I do? What should I do? Everybody knows what to say. I don't know what to say. How can I help? How can I be of service? People are really wanting to step into leadership, but really not knowing how to do so. So I've got like about 4 different things I want to say and like different threads on this. One is that, for me, I've been really blown away by the innovation, the ingenuity, the creativity that has been coming through in a remarkable way. And this is not to sugarcoat the horrendous experience that so many people are living through and into right now. So in any way, shape, or form, I don't want to be dismissive of that. when I say that I feel hopeful, I do feel hopeful about the innovation that I'm seeing, the creativity that I'm seeing. I'm also feeling hopeful about the fact that there are so many foundational cracks in the structure of our systems that we're now like, we probably are going to need to fix those. So I feel very hopeful.
We need to fix a lot of things.
That's it, right? And a lot of people have been talking about that for a very long time, but there's a subset of people that I would say the majority of the population are finally just waking up to it, to food insecurity, to inequities, right? So that is like a hopeful place to be. What I have found to be incredibly helpful for people who are, for leaders and maybe aren't sure how they can step up. Maybe I'll get you the link to it. There's a Medium article written by Deepa Iyer about mapping social change roles in times of crisis. And what she was talking about is that we don't all have to be first responders. We don't all have to be disruptors, or we all have to figure out how we serve best. So for me, I'm a visionary. Like I imagine and I hold our boldest possibilities. I remind us of our direction. That's what you do too, Orion. You're a beautiful, brilliant visionary.
Thank you, Tanya.
Yeah,
I feel so good inside right now.
Yeah,
I feel
good.
warm and fuzzy.
That's what you're doing right here, right now, right? Like you don't need to be the person on the front line, handing out PPEs. Literally, I just finished saying, my husband, he's the Red Cross. Like some people are doing that. That's not to say that you don't need to care, that I don't need to care, but I'm not going to be a frontline responder. That's not where I will serve best. There are builders, there are caregivers, there are healers, there are storytellers, there are guides. There are all of these different roles that are all needed.
Comedians,
yeah. Storytellers through art, through music, through comedy. Like we need everybody doing what they do best. And that's always been true. But when it's in a time of crisis like this, it becomes that much more acute. And so when I say I feel kind of hopeful, I feel kind of hopeful because we can see that. Like we can see how we are all required as part of a system, as part of a structure, all doing our best. I've always that's what I've always stood for. That's what you've always stood for. But now we can really see it. So instead of sitting on our hands and feeling, only hopeless and helpless, because of course that's a perfectly appropriate response in this, this experience that's unprecedented for us, it's perfectly reasonable to feel sad, scared, disappointed. Am I going to get to Barcelona for that trip that I've planned for my family? Probably not. Disappointed. And and then scared for my neighbors and worried, all of those things. And now I continue to know how I serve best and what my role is. And I need to dig deep and dig strong and be a part of this changing of the system, changing of and holding our direction. So we're all needed. We just need to do.
I love what you're saying. And if you are experiencing fear, anxiety, which is normal, we all did. I mean, how can you not? The easiest way to get out of depression or fear or anxiety, because when you are depressed, you pour your attention inward. This is like you're in a bubble with yourself and your thoughts. And the way to get out of it is to get out of your bubble and reach out to somebody else and ask them, how are they doing? Do they need anything? Is there an elderly neighbor in your neighborhood that needs something? Can you walk down the street and maybe smile to your neighbor because they don't feel that hot? Or if somebody that you love comes to mind, don't just brush it off. Go and call them and see if they need anything. Because the moment you shift the attention from this emotional salad to somebody else's, then you step into leadership and you forget about your worries because you are there in service of somebody else. And then you don't only uplift that person, you gain that beautiful feeling of love and achievement yourself. So it's a win-win situation.
Hallelujah. I'm going to say it again. Yes, 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 yes,
yes. Wow, Tanya, this was so much fun. I love talking to you, and you are so wise and so real, and I really appreciate that. Before we say goodbye for now, I have 2 questions for you. One is, what are your 3 top tips to living a stellar life? And the second one is, where can people find you?
I think about the opposite experience of the imposter complex for me is unshakable confidence. And that quality of unshakable confidence, meaning that you can be your most expanded, most stellar self from a place of rooted confidence, comes down to integrity, presence, and action. So integrity, this is about honestly knowing who you are, no matter what they say, no matter what they want, it's who you are. Presence about really knowing what you stand for and holding a deep reverence for that and the person that you are, the powerful being that you are, and then taking right action from there. So I would say it comes down to that for me, really being able to root in, dial in with integrity, amp up with presence, and then really taking action from that integrity, presence-filled place.
Beautifully said.
That's what I want for people. And they can find me at TanyaGeisler.com and all over social media at Instagram, I'm Tanya Geisler. Facebook, I'm Tanya Geisler Coaching. But yeah, TanyaGeisler.com is where they'll find me, and they can also do that quiz there. And I'm so delighted to have been here and have had this conversation. You are remarkable, Orion. You are truly remarkable.
Oh, you're so sweet. You too. You too.
Yeah.
I'm blushing right now. Well, thank you so much, Tanya. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
And thank you. And thank you, listeners. Remember to build an unshakable confidence with integrity, presence, and passion, and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time. Thank you for joining me on my mission to light people up and change lives around the world. I hope today's conversation inspires you to step up, go after the life of your dreams, and be who you want to be. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to go to stellarlifepodcast.com for show notes, transcripts, and other cool stuff. And please subscribe, review, and help spread the word by sharing us on Facebook and Twitter. Have a lovely day, and I'll catch you on the next episode.